morning, boys and girls. I decided to do this very short video in order to explain you the social conditions where Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King lived. In order to understand the American society at that time, we have to go back to some important events in American history. So look at the timeline I prepared for you. Here there are some important dates in American history, and they all explain the society in the year 50s and 60s where Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King lived. So let's go back to the very first date. Here you can see 1492. 1492 is, obviously, the discovery of America, okay? When Europeans started to arrive after Christopher Columbus discovered America. Over the centuries, from 1492 to 1776, where the British colonies declared their independence from the UK, over these 3 centuries, American society was deeply influenced by the slave trade. What is the slave trade? So, the slave trade was a traffic of slaves from Europe to the USA. The European power, especially the British Empire, in fact, starting from the UK, went to West Africa. They took the slaves. Slaves are schiavi. So they took young men and young women and they brought them to the Caribbean. So slaves are people who are not free. Once they were here in the Caribbean, they were sold. So very rich people, especially the owners of the plantation in the southern states of the USA, bought the slaves. So rich people bought the slaves in order to work in sugar plantation, tobacco plantation. Sorry, let's see. So tobacco, sugar, and cotton plantation. Okay, tobacco, sugar, and cotton plantations. The black people were very strong, and that's why British people and American people decided to make them work in this plantation. Obviously, in this period, during these centuries and in the plantation, the gospel songs and the spiritual songs were born. In fact, while they were working in the plantation, the black people used to sing spirituals and gospel. Obviously, the slavery, and so slaves, at a certain point had the idea that this situation was very heavy. And the northern states in 1776, when they declared independence from the United Kingdom, decided that even in the southern states, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, where the slaves lived, they needed to stop and to abolish slavery. That's why in 1861 civil war started. The civil war was between the northern state and the southern states. The northern states were free, okay? And they wanted to abolish slavery. The southern states obviously have slavery, la schiavitù. They still have slavery, The Civil War lasted 4 years, from 1861 to 1865, and the northern states won the Civil War. In fact, slavery was abolished at the end of the war. This is a very important, and the president during the Civil War was Abraham Lincoln. So, slavery was literally abolished by President Lincoln in 1865. Even if slavery was abolished, during the century after, so in this period, in 1955, slavery was abolished, but segregation started. So there wasn't still integration between black people and white people. So let's try to remember what the word segregation means. Segregation is to separate people. So it's a separation of people and facilities. There is an F here, facilities, servizi, within the same society. So in the same society in the USA, there were facilities, servizi, and people separated. From one part there were the whites, and on the other hand there were the blacks. Okay, an example of segregation at that time, for example, were public toilets. There were public toilets for white people and public toilets for black people. And at that time, black people were called colored. Can you see the sign here? The colored people and the white people. In the same toilets, for example, there were also fountains fountains for black people and fountains for black people. Can you see here? There is another example of segregation in the same toilets. For example, here. Another example of segregation were the buses, of course. The buses. At the beginning, the buses were divided for white people and for black people. Later, the same bus can be caught by white and black, but colored people go to back. So the back seats of the bus, this is the bus, okay? Here is the bus driver. If this is the bus driver, colored people should sit at the back. Okay, so the back seats were for black people. In fact, this was the problem of Rosa Parks. When in 1955 segregation still existed and she refuses to give her seat to a white person on the bus. She sat in the very first row of the bus and she refused to give her seat. In 1955, Martin Luther King lived and worked, and so he decided to organize the bus boycott after Rosa Parks was imprisoned, okay? And in 1963, segregation still exists when Martin Luther King had his famous speech, "I Have a Dream." So when segregation stopped in American society? Only from the 70s. In the 70s, in 1970s, American people realized that segregation was useless, was unconstitutional, because you know that the American Constitution says that equality is a very important part of American life. So only from the 70s we have an awareness, una consapevolezza of American society. Spero che questa spiegazione abbia leggermente chiarito qualche dubbio in merito alla segregation e alla, come dire, all'avere inserito da un punto di vista proprio storico e sociale le azioni di Rosa Parks e di Martin Luther King, e che possa esservi d'aiuto anche per sostenere il test di venerdì. Good luck!